The Hilarious World of Depression is an ongoing learning experience. I would be remiss as a host if I didn't share my learning with you. I am from public broadcasting after all, so it's important that you share intelligent information before you ask people for money. It's part of the horrifying beauty of nature. So a list of things I learned that you might find useful from this season. Before we get into them, some honorable mentions from our guests. If you're a child in a brownie commercial, you are expected to swallow the brownie, get none on your teeth, and then immediately speak. If you have a panic attack in LeBron James's trailer, he will take care of you. We learned that from Neil Brennan. If you have an eating disorder while starring in a 90s sitcom, nobody will take care of you. We learned that from Margaret Cho. And if you have to write a novel, don't go off your meds. We learned that from John Green. Now, I learned a lot of lessons, a lot about mental illness, but I learned a lot about learning about mental illness too. So here are my top 10 lessons that I learned this season. Because 10 is a lot, and we've been in a jazz club talking depression for a while, I've made slides of animals wearing clothes to amuse you while I talk about these important things. Number 1, people want to talk. We offer nothing for people to appear on our show. We don't pay. A lot of guests are already more famous than we can make them. They just want to talk. This is a really handy thing to remember as you go out into the world, talking to people about depression, talking to people about mental illness. They are eager to do so. There's no way that we could have filled a 20-episode season if they weren't. The thing is, society has told them for a long time not to. They want to do it anyway. Number 2, you don't need notes. I've been in broadcasting for many, many years, and I was taught to prepare lots of notes, lots of questions, do this whole plan for how the conversation is going to go. And with this show, I decided to find out what would happen if I didn't do any of that. So every interview that you've heard on the Hilarious World of Depression, I go in there with no paper in front of me. There's some things I might want to find out, but mostly I just want to see how the conversation goes. I want to see where it goes. I want to listen to the person. This is also useful in talking about mental illness with people that you meet. If you go into it with a plan for how the conversation's going to go, you will either get that conversation, which might not be the one that that person needs to have, or you will get a broken conversation, which is no use to anybody. You don't need notes. Number 3, talk like a 3-year-old. There's a picture of a horse wearing a suit. One of my heroes in radio was a man named David Kando, who recently passed away. And David was a veteran CBC broadcaster from Canada, and he said that the greatest interviewers in the world are 3-year-olds, and we can all aspire to be as good as a 3-year-old at interviewing. Because if they don't understand something, what do they say? Why? And if the answer isn't good enough, what do they ask? Why? And they will drive you insane until you get broken down to the root components of your rhetorical existence. And then they've won. And they're genuinely curious. Every interview I do, and I've learned through the Hilarious World of Depression, and I think, too, this might work for anybody if they don't get punched for asking why all those times, is you just listen to what someone says, you get to the part that you don't understand, and you say, wait, what do you mean by that? And that comes from not having notes, and that comes from thinking like a 3-year-old. Number 4, everyone's a fraud. You're not supposed to be broken, but you're broken, but you're not supposed to be. And that's what living with depression feels like. You know that it feels wrong, and you know that it's not supposed to be this way, but you can't really help it. And so then you feel bad about yourself. You feel like a pariah, and you feel like you need to keep it a secret. What I've learned is just about every person I've talked to with mental illness And just about every person I've talked to without any noticeable mental illness has some sort of feeling inside them that they have a secret that they just hope nobody else figures out. Everybody's going through life just acting to some extent and hoping not to get busted. But the good news is that they haven't caught you yet, so you're really good at hiding, so maybe don't worry about it. Number 5, you've been ripped off. I talk to people with depression. Don't say, oh, about a raccoon. They're horrible, horrible animals. Depression is not a moral failing. It's a mental illness. You didn't misplace your car. Someone hot-wired it and drove off with it. The car is your mental health. Depression can steal your ability to feel good things. It can make you feel like you're in an even more vulnerable position, more likely to be exposed. You think that you've been careless. You think that you've done something wrong. You think that you weren't strong enough, and if you tried harder, you could be stronger. But the fact is, somebody messed with you. Might be your mind, might be chemistry, might be trauma, but it's not your fault. You've been ripped off. And the thief still has the keys to your house a lot of the time. The thief comes in while you're home and takes your stuff, and you need to say, hey, that's my Alexa speaker, you can't have that. That's my toaster, you don't get to have it. It's tough, though, but it's not your fault. Number 6, there's no achieving your way out of this. The first conversation I had for this show is for our first episode with Peter Sagal, host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, who has had an incredible career of plays being produced and books being written and PBS series, and of course, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and he went to Yale. And he always said that, I thought that if I could just keep achieving things, then I couldn't possibly be depressed. Because someone who achieves all those things wouldn't be depressed. Therefore, if I achieve them, it will go away. And it doesn't work like that. Neil Brennan, who we talked to for this season, said this about the biggest stars in Hollywood. He said, Oscar winner actors and actresses, people you know, people who are household names, have told him, I achieved all this and it didn't do anything. I still feel terrible. And they need to go get that taken care of. You can't achieve your way out of it. Number 7, it's easier to fight stigma when you have privilege. The extent to which you can act against stigma is proportionate to how much privilege you have. If you are white, if you are straight, you can fall back on things. You can fall back on a society that will protect you. I talked with Reggie Osei this season, who is unfortunately the late Reggie Osei. He passed away after I interviewed him. He said that he had resisted going to a psychiatrist, to a therapist for a long time, because he didn't want the admission that he had vulnerability. He couldn't afford it, not in the world he's living in, not as a black man in America. Margaret Cho talked about how, in this season, talked about how as a child of Korean immigrants, there was an enforcement of the idea of strength and poise that you needed to make it in America. It was required. And if you didn't have that, you needed to act like you had it. I think it's no coincidence that a lot of the comedians and musicians that you run into out in the world who have gotten opportunities are white men, because they have been in positions where they can open their heart. They can joke about themselves. They can talk about their depression. They can lay all their thoughts bare in music or comedy because society will protect them. I think it's really important when you talk about stigma is to talk about privilege at the same time, and think about how privilege affects that conversation. Number 8, we're dumb about terms. So often you hear people talk about, use words that they don't really mean. They're trying to hyperbolize certain conditions that you have. Some of you might say, oh, I'm totally OCD about my pencils. But they're not OCD. They just like their pencils a certain way. They're merely tidy. Someone is not schizophrenic for changing their mind. Someone doesn't have PTSD because they had a bad day. They simply had a bad day. And being depressed doesn't mean you're mopey and sullen. That's a mood. That's not an illness. People co-opt these terms and lessen the power of them and lessen the importance of them. And they rob those from people with those mental illnesses. And I think they should cut it out. Number 9, there is no magic cure. Everybody I talk to has tried something else. Neil Brennan talked about Zoloft, ketamine, microdosing, lifesavers. Those didn't work at all. He finally arrived back at Zoloft. Margaret Cho works out like crazy, and that works for her. I talked with people who've gone to Al-Anon, and that's worked for them. People who've tried all sorts of meds and found some that worked. People who've tried meds and haven't found any that worked. Everybody has a different way of going about it. There's no magical cure. I wish there was. We'd all take it. And finally, there is no ending. We're a narrative-driven culture. We're a story-driven culture, and we like to think that a person exists and then runs into a problem and then has a struggle and then finally overcomes the problem and then the credits roll. Because movies are all built like that. Every single movie coming out of Hollywood follows that formula. And we watch a lot of movies and TV shows, and so we expect a happy ending, or we expect resolution at least, and it doesn't happen. Depression, any kind of mental illness, is a really badly written story. It just meanders, and it goes away, and characters come and go because it's just not like the movies. And I think that the people I've talked to, and I've talked with a whole lot of people who accept that they're just on a journey and there is no tidy plot, tend to do a little bit better. I don't know how stories will end. I fear for the lives of some of the people that I've talked to. But I have a lot of hope because those conversations are taking place. On a serious note, we have had so much success with this show, so much more than I ever expected. And what we're doing, I think it's wonderful. It's not unique. Like, we didn't come up with this crazy way of doing interviews that blows everybody's minds. I'm just a dude having conversations. I have no medical training. I'm kind of dumb. But I talk to people, and they're eager to talk. And then those conversations happen. And I think the success of our show, which is supported by all of you, and thank you very much, is more than anything an indication that people are starving for that conversation. And we are providing it. And people are providing it back to us very, very strongly on an ongoing basis. And thank you all for that.